This is Kenya's the number one opera in the world, according to Thorin. You're watching Thorin channel.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is going to be BIT. But as you can see, there is not a Ukrainian player from Navi there. I mean the original BIT, which is actually an old school Brazilian player from MIBR. By the way, just to start with, what do you actually think about that? Like, do you feel like your name's been stolen? Do people not realise who you are? What do you think of someone else being called BIT now?
Nah, actually, I don't care, to be honest.
Okay.
It doesn't change anything. Sometimes there's like some jokes in Twitter where people are like tagging the Ukrainian bitches,
Right.
stuff like this. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah, like if there's a stream and Gaules is saying something like this or the real beat or something, maybe people will tag him, and this may be a bit annoying for him,
Right.
and for me as well. But yeah, besides this, it's just sometimes we even joke about.
One point I often make when I do my interviews like this with Brazilian players, especially really old school ones, is a lot of people maybe aren't aware bits that actually Brazilian Counter-Strike developed a bit like Counter-Strike in places like Sweden. It was all about going to LAN cafes and having like regional circuits. And so if people don't know, there's two things. One, as far as I know, every Brazilian pro from your era was going from PC cafes. They weren't just sat at their own home playing a PC. And then secondly, it was mainly based on what region you're from. Like as far as I know, it wasn't like MIBR and G3X. Like one was Rio, one was Sao Paulo. Right? Can you give me some sense of like when you came into the scene? Was it like this?
Yeah, like back in the days, there was not even internet.
Right.
People don't play on internet. It was just like LAN house and stuff like this. So it was basically at the beginning, it was like neighborhood against another neighborhood and stuff like this. It was not even like cities, and then. As soon as the game started like at a higher getting to a higher level, and then they become to start to be like more cities like São Paulo against Rio de Janeiro against Curitiba and stuff like this. And yeah, it was mainly because there was no internet to play, so you have to be at the place to play Counter-Strike.
What was your background? Because if people don't know, the teams you came up through, there was a team that people won't remember now called Global Challengers. But basically, the players in that team became the next one you're in, which is people might know GameCrashers. If people don't know, the most famous teams in Brazil is obviously MIBR and G3X. That goes without saying. But after that, GameCrashers actually was quite a famous team, not least because it had people like you, BTT, Thorin. These are all known players. Maybe they're not as famous as the big MIBR names, but I think everyone who watched 1.6 knows these people. Were these people from your area or something? How do you get this group of people? Because you were with a bunch of these players even later in your career when, the other guys went to Source. These guys came and played with you. So were these your guys?
Yeah, GC was kind of like a team without sponsors, like G3X and MIBR, they had good sponsors already back to 2003 and stuff like this. And GC was pretty much just one guy it was Beto China. He was like the coach / owner. Like he did everything for the team. He was like picking up his car and picking every player from on each house and bringing to the LAN to play. Yeah, he was kind of like the father of everyone. And at some point, a lot of players in Brazil played for GC. I think most of the top players in Brazil played for GC at some point. And then, yeah, of course, because of the sponsor stuff, we had no salary. It was basically like us going to tournaments every weekend, sometimes going to 2 tournaments at the same weekend in different cities, just to make money, to live the dream of playing Counter-Strike. And yeah, GC was just like the top 3 in Brazil, and sometimes even top 1. Yeah, sometimes they reach that. It was. But they kind of work as an academy for every team because of the sponsors. Like if someone from MIBR is calling you to play for them, it's like a huge difference between making a lot of money on the MIBR. You could make like 1,000. 15,000, 1,500 in reais in Brazil back to 2003, and it was a lot of money.
That's probably like a few $100, I'm guessing, right? That's probably still like a not bad money for back then,
it's still a lot of money. So they kind of work as academy for pretty much G3X and MIBR, but it was, Sheena was amazing guy. He was like a father for everyone. A lot of things he taught me was he had like a big protection on his team. He could do anything to make his team win,
Right.
And yeah, it was a very good place to start playing CS. It was the best thing I would say to start,
All right.
to begin your career. Yeah.
By the way, let me ask about some of these players, because there's two problems that people have if they're Brazilian old school 1.6 players. One is there's that trend where every single player made their name a 3-letter thing, which just made it more complicated if you're not from Brazil, unfortunately. And then the other aspect is, unless someone was in basically the MIBR that won ESWC, a lot of people don't remember these other players. So if I say the player BTT, as I said, he later on actually got to reunite with you in MIBR, and you had that great Dreamhack Winter and stuff. Who was this guy? Because I feel like he's one of those like forgotten players, but he had quite a long career. He was in some top teams.
Yeah, there's a funny story about the 3 letters thing. I think back to 2003 and 4 or something, we had one guy in your team that was called Cozinho, which is kind of like a asshole or something.
Right,
It was like it was a bad word. And back then we almost had like be the sponsor of any video or something. Like it was like a big company in Brazil. Yeah, they were going to sponsor GC, and obviously I don't know if they asked Cozinho to change his nickname or something like this, or it was just like Beto China. That's
just a good idea anyway, though, isn't it?
Yeah, man, this is a good idea. Just change your name,
right?
And then he didn't know what name to put, and then he just like CZO, it was like abbreviation of his nickname. And at some point, like everyone, like my nickname was not Beat, it was Bitoka, and then I changed it for Beat, and BTT was Batata, and he BTT, and like everyone started to change for 3 letters. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think the main reason was because of this, because he had to change his name. And then at some point, even when we played against Lurpis team from Finland, I think they even put like LRP and
to joke, right?
Like
to make fun of it, right? I see. Okay. Who was this guy that BTT? Who was he?
Yeah, BTT was. He also started playing in GC with me. I think he started with another other teams in Brazil, but he was very rumble guy. He had to do crazy stuff to play CS, because he used it to live in a very very far place.
If people don't know, if someone's not from Brazil is really big as well. Like you can be a long far away, right?
Yeah, he used it to live in São Paulo, but he had to like walk 30 minutes, then take a bus, take a train, then walk 30 minutes just to practice every single day. It was crazy stuff. That's how much he wanted to become a pro, to play for GC. And I think pretty much everyone was kind of like this, back then. It was mainly because you love the game, and you do whatever you want. It doesn't matter if you live like 2 hours away from the LAN center, you have to go to play for a good team. You're doing it, you know. And at some point he played for GC, and then he just developed it very fast, And I think he played for GC, and then he got kicked, and he played for MIBR for some time, and then they had this crazy dream team in GC as well, where they had like Kiko, BTT, and all the stars from Brazil, which didn't work at the end. But they had a crazy team. But he was he was a very nice guy, and it was impressive the way he started playing, because it was a lot of effort, because he was. How do I say this? He didn't have a lot of money, so it was kind of hard for him, even if you have to buy train tickets and bus tickets, this is a lot of money still for some people. Sometimes people in your team don't even have money to buy food, you have to go back, and it was crazy. That's why we used it to go to a lot of tournaments in São Paulo, and even outside of São Paulo, one tournament on Saturday, another tournament on Sunday, just to make sure we can like live and
win the prize
playing,
money and stuff. Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
right.
And sometimes we go to tournaments that we are making like $1,
right.
You spend money on hotel, you spend money on gas and stuff like this, and then you go back and you have like 5 real. You're like, okay.
By the way,
yeah,
I have a question along these lines I want to ask then. So obviously in the modern day of like CSGO and CS2, people will know you have coached a bunch of up-and-coming players. What I want to ask is, actually, this is a common trend in the reflections I've done with old school Brazilian players bit, which is everyone has a really hard story where it's like, as you say, people aren't making a lot of money. Sometimes even like their parents don't want them to play, or they don't have a PC, or they can't even go to somewhere where there's a big team. And it's like everyone's doing the grind. They're all trying to just make it for the dream, you know, of how much they love CS.
No.
I want to contrast that because I feel like in the modern day, actually, some of the really famous Brazilian players in CSGO maybe got a bad reputation. That actually, I'll give you an example. When Zeus was the coach of Team Liquid, so he left the Brazilian players, I got to know this guy. I once asked him, like, I won't say the names because I don't know if you're going to coach them one day, so I don't want to be rude, but certain players who were very good players and clearly had a lot of talent, people might be able to think of some names, but they were known to not have a great work ethic bit. They were like people where, you know, they didn't practice as much, or maybe they did weird things like, you know, hop to another team just to play with a friend or something where they could have been in a top team. I would ask him, like, what's going on? Like, I thought these guys would be like super driven. And he said basically, like, back in the day, everyone was. You had to be to even make it. But he said in the modern day, there's like a weird, almost like a cultural thing where people think if they make it to the top, because there's so much money now in Counter-Strike, they almost think it's like cool to like not try. Like, I would give the example bit is if people know football, I think most people who watch football would agree the player Neymar he might have been like, dude, he had the skill to probably be like the best player ever, but he looked like he preferred to party and, you know, go to this league over here or do something with a model over here. Do you get what I mean? Do you feel like there's a difference in like the culture in Counter-Strike in Brazil now that there's so much money and fame? It's kind of a major region, mate. All the viewers come from this region.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, it's very, very, very hard to be the same as Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, maybe Cogu.
Sure.
Like if you talk about CS, it's very different. It's very difficult, you know, because those guys, they're out of the box, you know, they are like one of a kind.
Yes.
But you know, like I think like in Brazil, there's, of course, it's different than in Europe because you change your life too fast, you know. It's like even back to 1.6, if you're making, like, we're not making a lot of money as nowadays, but it was still a lot of money compared if you're like a kid like 16 years old, you know. Yeah. So it's kind of easy to have distraction. I think nowadays you have a lot of more distraction than back then. Of course, you have media, you have social media, you have a lot of stuff. So it's different nowadays, right? But I think back in the days, even though there's a lot of people that lose opportunity, of course, it's normal. But there was still a lot of people like. There was so many good players in Brazil back then because Counter-Strike in Brazil was crazy. There was like a LAN house, like each block you go,
right,
you can you see a lot of people playing, and people are very passionate about this, and people live in another city, but they come to São Paulo to play a lot of tournaments, even though they have to take like a 20 hours bus ride, you know. But I think nowadays is a problem because it's very easy to have a lot of distractions. You make a lot of money. I think back in the days it was fine. I think there was a lot of, if you're like on GC, G3X, MIBR, people like, there was a lot of good people in control of these teams, you know, like there were Gaules. Maybe at some point they could struggle, you know, because that's normal, but it was like those big three teams in Brazil, they had like good leaders, you know.
Right.
They could make the difference on a lot of young players for sure.
Oh, I see what you mean by that. So essentially a bit like you described about the guy who was in charge of the GameCrashers team. Obviously people will know that guy, Paul, or whatever his name is, who ran the MIBR. As you say, G3X Gaules was there pretty much the whole time as like a captain and a figure and later a coach, etc. Do you think that was part of also what changed it? Is like you had like leadership figures basically in the scene?
Yeah, I mean, if you like talking about GC, we had this guy, and he was doing a lot of stuff for anybody on his team. He even created the academy team back then in 2003.
Oh wow, right.
So like back then we had GC and GCBR, which was like the academy team. It was like at some point the academy was like me, FNX, and Lancy, which was also a good player, Chucky, and I don't know, someone else, which was like maybe 1 year after, it was like a top player in Brazil.
I mean, every player in this eventually went on to be in like G3X or MIBR from this lineup you're talking about, Right.
Yeah. So yeah, there was a lot of good people behind the teams, which like could make everything work. Like not lose focus, and yeah, there was also a huge rivalry between those three
Oh,
teams. It
sure.
was like, yeah, at some point people are not talking to each other.
Right.
People are like, yeah, there was a lot of crazy stories back then. Yeah, people like GC was kind of like a mid team. It was like between G3X and MIBR. Sometimes we are like, okay, we are MIBR partner. We are just playing then just to
Right.
fuck G3X, and
Right.
then sometimes we are like, okay, let's group with G3X and let's fuck MIBRs. Yeah, it was a lot of
Okay.
yeah. People wanted so much back then to win tournaments. It doesn't matter if it was like a lot of money, it was a computer, it was like just even internet. There was a lot of internet tournaments just for like the glory, It was like no prize pool and stuff like this, and people would play very serious. Yeah, it was there was a lot of good people in Brazil.
Because one of the other reasons I also ask that question, since now you're a coach figure yourself and you see what the modern players are like, is because I want people to understand that actually back then, people wouldn't ever expect any Brazilian player to be kind of like a diva or to be troublesome, because it's actually really hard to get into the scene. It's really hard to even be a pro and to get into MIBR or GTX, and especially, by the way, to ever get sent to another country or to win those qualifiers. So the reason I bring this up bit is because it actually means, if people don't know, back then, when people first met FNX, he really was kind of like the rock star of Brazilian CS, because this guy was like this ridiculous teenage talent. Like, people don't know, he was like some dog figure. He just came out of nowhere. He was just amazing immediately. And he kind of was just like, he had a really wild personality. I mean, not like people know now where he's like a big influence stuff. He kind of like, he was a teenager. He was like a kid. He could do crazy things. Yeah. So I want to ask you this. I looked this up. You played with FNX when he was 14. What was 14-year-old FNX like, mate?
Yeah, I think I met FNX for the first time maybe 2002 or something.
Oh wow!
So, yeah,
I think it would have been like 12 or 13. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, the first time I remember I went to his house at some point, and his grandmother was like, "Oh, go read a book, stop playing CS."
Right.
And she was like screaming a lot of stuff like this. I was like a bit scary, But yeah, but I think we kind of had like a very similar path, because we're like very young players. We spend a lot of time playing CS. We pretty much live in cyber cafes. We're like playing 24 hours. Like people, a lot of people nowadays think FNX doesn't play CS and stuff like this. But yeah, I think from 12 years to 18, like FNX was like, he was living in.
Oh, he was grinding, like right.
Yeah, he was.
Right.
Yeah, he was not going home for like.
Right.
Sometimes he was not going home for like 4 days.
Fucking hell, okay.
Yeah, and his mom's like, "Where the fuck you are? Like you have 13 years, And yeah, sometimes we are like missing school and stuff like this. He wasn't like grinding so much,
Was he already really good? Was he good in the game already as a teenager?
Yeah, I think that he was, when he was 14, he was already very, very good. He was one of the best in Brazil already. And yeah, of course, he had a lot to learn. I think he kind of exploded like when he joined MIBR, but before MIBR, he was playing for Arm 5, and a lot of people already was talking about him.
Right.
Because he was very good. And yeah, we also had like this problem, which back then you had to be over 17 or something to play
CPLs.
CPL.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think for the most of the time, me and him, we had like opportunities to play for G3X or GC, and even sometimes we won qualifiers, but we could not go to CPL because we didn't have age enough.
Because the people don't know you're the same age as FNX roughly, right?
Yeah, so back then there was a lot of missing opportunities by me and him just because of the age, because if he had like enough age, or we didn't have like age restriction to play CPL, we would be on G3X or MIBR if on 15 for maybe 14, 15 years. Yeah, for sure.
Another player.
That's how good we are. It's just like Donk nowadays. It was crazy.
Another player from this team, like I referenced as well, another one that doesn't have the same name value, but I can tell you this guy was definitely a good player, was the player Thorin. Now, I'll tell you a bit. If I just tell you how I first heard of this player, it will be how most Westerners did, which is when you hear about this Brazilian scene, all the hype from the Brazilian players was like, this guy might actually be better than Cogu. Now, if you're not from Brazil, you're like, oh, come on. Cogu, like, no one's better than Cogu with the AWP. Come on, he's like probably the best AWP. But then I did watch some of the demos, and I was like, listen, I don't know if anyone's better than Cogu, but this guy's fucking insane too. Like, this guy could have been a really amazing player, right? He maybe didn't have the proper career he could have.
Yeah, when I joined GC, he was already GC player. He was already there. And yeah, he was just... I mean, there's still some... People still compare Cogu to Thorin.
Right.
Still nowadays, yeah, there's a lot of like the discussion between who was the better player and stuff like this. I think they are both very good players, of course, and they are very different players. You know, like I would say if you compare nowadays, maybe Cogu was kind of like Zayo. You know, he like never missed any shots.
Right.
Cogu was. Yeah, he was like this. He never missed. You know, he was aggressive. But he knows how to play passive. He's good clutchy and stuff like this. He had like the whole package. You know, and Tom was kind of like maybe Monezist, and yeah, because he had like crazy movements. He could hit like insane flick shots, and he had like very big creativity to create stuff. You know, like the nuke big jump that you're like on a big mountain and you jump on the box and you don't lose HP. It was like him. You know, he had like he had a lot of stuff. But yeah, even though they are very good players, I think they are very different players as well. But yeah, they are both insane. He had like a kind of similar story to BTT because they used to live in the same place. They live in the same neighborhood in Brazil, and yeah, he had like the same thing, you know.
Oh, right.
One guy without money, you go. Betchina had to drive him to his home, sometimes talk to his parents to let him play and stuff like this. And yeah, it was a beautiful story, just like BTT.
One thing I need to ask you is this, though, which is it makes sense sort of how FNX could get away with being this like 14, 50-year-old kid because he was just an aggressive rifler. That sort of player in Counter-Strike is actually probably the easiest for a young player to do. You just gotta let them go out and frag and you figure the rest out. How does someone become an in-game leader when they're this young? Like, I don't think Brazil's pretty much that famous for in-game leaders bit. So if you're like a teenager, how do you get like big name players to respect you? Was it difficult to like win people over like that?
I think there was no problem like this back then, right. To be honest. I think a lot of people respect each other. I think, of course, we had like a lot of problems because back then we didn't know how to like... I think, like for example, nowadays we've been through a lot of stuff and we know how to like we have background, you know. We know what happened in the past, but back then we had a lot of problems because sometimes we want to change player a lot, you know.
Oh, right,
like
right.
You had no contract and stuff like this. So,
yeah.
But respecting the game, I think it was fine. It was fine. I started to be IGL mainly because Cogu didn't want to.
Okay.
So yeah, at some point he was like, okay, maybe this is like making my game worse.
Okay.
And then someone else have to do it, and then I've ever been the player that talk a lot in game and stuff like this. So yeah, okay, you're going to do it. Then after some point we had neck, but I think nowadays we have a lot of like people need to have goals about how to play the game, and back then you pretty much have to do everything, you know.
Right.
You have to be entry, you have to be lurker, you have to be IGL, you have to be everything, you know. We didn't have like set roles, you know, like we have today. It was kind of easier.
What would you say your style or your vision of how to play CS was back then? Because I remember, if people know, just a year or two before you came into the scene was when actually my friend from Norway, BSL, went to MIBR famously and kind of taught them the European meta of how you play CS. Because back then, as far as I remember, I think he said back then it really was like the meme of like Samba CS. I think they just rushed all the time, mate, and just played off skill or something, you know. And then later, when, as you say, because Cogu at one point was just the best player, he was, if people don't know, he like primary opt and IGL'd. And as far as I remember, bro, he he should do this, but he just called the game around himself because he was Cogu. So he just basically just set up all his kills and then won the game, right? But that's a very different style to like traditional in-game leaders. So what was BIT like? What type of leader were you, do you think?
Yeah, I think I've been always like more tactical, at some point, I think like back to 2007, we kind of like had our own way to play CS, which was like a mixer on both ways. But yeah, it was easier to to have like the own style because we're in Sweden like most of the time. Like for the whole year, we're like playing Europe CS and stuff like this. It was very easy to play every day against those teams and to adapt and to create new stuff and to know which things are working or not.
Right.
And at some point when we started to lose a lot of opportunities, like maybe 2000 years or something, we didn't have like a lot of bootcamps and stuff like this. So we kind of had like, I think at some point we had to copy too much stuff from Europe,
Right.
and we started to change in the way we see the game and stuff like this. Because yeah, it was kind of like at some point we played 10 tournaments in a year, and then you play 2 tournaments, and then you go to this tournament and you got crashed, and okay, maybe we have to start do what they do, and yeah, you lose identity, it was kind of like this. So it was kind of changing at some point.
Yeah, if people don't know, this is another detail that we can actually introduce, especially obviously once you're in MIBR. As you're saying, one of the approaches that was taken, it was a very clever approach, by the way. I actually know that's the same thing that the Koreans did, like we made Fox. Who else would I think of like this? I think in the modern day, you could give an example. If you talk about CS2, I'm pretty sure this is why the Mongols is good now. In fact, let me use that example bit. Mongols, obviously, over in Mongolia, don't have any top teams they're playing against that show them the European meta. But the point is, they can come and have a boot camp before they do the European tournament. So what they do is they come and they have a week or two, which basically means you're getting the same practice a European team would for those weeks. Like, if people don't know, back then, that's what MIBR used to do every single time. You would go to like Sweden, go to like Inferno Online or whatever famous cafe was the main one back then, and you guys would just go for like a week or two and just basically have normal scrims in Europe, right? Was this, as you're saying, was this like the main approach to leveling up your game knowledge and knowing how the teams play and stuff?
Yeah, it kind of started like on MIBR, I think Paulo was he had a very good vision on how to become better, because at some point he brought SK to Brazil, and there was a lot of team coming to Brazil just to practice against MIBR. So he had a good ideas on how to make his team improve, and even nowadays, I think a year ago I met him and he was like, "Why are you guys going to NA or stuff like this? You guys have to be in Europe, You have to play against the best to become better every day and to become the best team you can be, Because if you're playing weaker team, that doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make you stronger, And back in the days, he had already this vision. And that was the idea of MIBR, and that worked very well because in MIBR at some point he was like making top 16, which was insane for Brazilian Counter-Strike.
Definitely.
And then top 10, top 8, and it was getting better and better every time. And so pretty much when I joined MIBR, we already had this vision of like, before every tournament, you're going to Inferno Line, you're going to be in Sweden, practicing against the best, you have 5 ping, you are all together, you have good teams to play against, so you have no excuse. You can say you're in Brazil and then you go out, you don't know those teams, you already used it to play against those guys, you're practicing against them every day. So it was kind of the mentality they had back in the days.
It's a famous thing, BIT, that people know for like players who aren't good on LAN, that like people are better in practice. But I always tell people, almost everyone's better in practice. Like even the best players are even better in practice. So famously, if you ever play against like the legendary names of 1.6, I've heard in scrims, some of them are like mind-blowing, bro. Like, so who do you remember? Who were the ones when you would go to Europe? Who were the players who impressed you if you play a scrim against someone? Who would be like a crazy player to play?
Yeah, it's funny because I even nowadays I talk to my players and I say, okay, a lot of tournaments we won back in the days, we're like getting destroyed in practice.
All right,
the tournament,
okay.
Like I remember when we played SAG in Denmark, which we won. I think before the tournament we were like getting like 28-2 against SK every single map. They're like jumping. I remember playing on Inferno and they're like jumping with 3 guys on the knife, trying to kill us, and it was like insane. But yeah, I would say the first player, like there's 2 players for sure. Like first one is Forrest. He was always insane, even Brexit tournaments and stuff like this. And I think the other ones, like the beginning of Get Right, was also insane. Like nobody knew him. And he was like very, very good player.
When you guys, for people who don't know, you joined MIBR the year after they won ESWC. It was actually the same lineup, but you just replaced Kiko, the very old school, very, very popular player, if people don't know. When you joined this team, were the expectations still that we could be one of the best teams in the world? Did people themselves ever think of like ESWC as a fluke? Did they think it was like we've actually, like you said, there was actually kind of a gradual progression of MIBR going up under Paulo, as you say. So was it viewed as like we actually are supposed to be one of the best teams now? We're supposed to win the majors and stuff?
I will be honest, I was like 16, I was not even thinking about anything. I was like the only thing when MIBR called me was like, okay, mom, I'm leaving. I'm leaving school, and I have to go to Sweden in maybe 1 month or something like this. It was like January or December 2002 or 3 or something. No, it was a little bit 2007 or something.
There you go.
But yeah. But I was not thinking about. I don't think people back then had like too much expectations. People. It was more like on the flow. Okay, I want to play CS, so we know we are good. I think at some point we kind of have this feeling of being, like we're a very good team. It was you're like untouchable, against weaker team and stuff like this. But I don't think people. We're like thinking about top 1, or of course we had like some rankings and stuff like this, which was like a big difference for us because we had bonus on salary and stuff like this. But yeah, but it was more like I was just a kid, I didn't care about anything. I was just playing CS every day, and yeah, there was no okay, I have to play 10 hours. No, I have to play 8 hours. No, I just wake up, I go to the LAN center, I play, I practice, I stay there playing, and then I go to back to the hotel to sleep, and every day is the same,
As you say, one of the first events actually that you even went to internationally was this event in Denmark. It was the SHG LAN, it was called. And if people don't know, I know it's not a memorable name, but this LAN had all the top teams there. Like in the final, for example, you played Neo and Taz's Pentagram team, who was like the World Cyber Games champions, who were the best team in the world or something. Yep. As you say, this was like one of the early ones. But as far as I know, when I looked on all the history stuff, is this actually the first event you went to outside of Brazil? Like this event in Copenhagen? What is this true? What's it like then to come from Brazil and be in bloody Denmark? And this must be what it was called as well, mate. What was that like? What was the experience like?
Yeah, this was a very, very hard time for me. Yeah, I say that I just wanted to play CS, but now remember about this tournament, there was a lot of hard stuff going on for me because I was never out of Brazil. It was the first time, maybe even take the plane,
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so I remember that as soon as we arrived in Sweden, it was snowing. And I went to travel on the plane with like shorts,
Right.
And yeah, like it was the first time leaving Brazil. Sure. I had no clothes for this kind of weather, And then I went to the bathroom to change, put jeans or stuff like this. And then I left my wallets in the bathroom. And on the first day, like before we go to every tournament, Paulo was meeting us and giving like money for food and stuff like this. And on the first day, I left my wallets in the bathroom, and as soon as we arrived on the Inferno line, I put my hands on my pockets, and I was like, "Oh, where's my wallets?" And yeah, there was like I had like $700 dollars just to eat because we're gonna spend a month in Sweden. And we're like, okay, on the first day, I already don't have money. I have maybe some credit card, but I don't have money on credit card. It was already crazy. And then, my team had to pay everything for me at the time. We went to have a lunch, and then I do kind of like this on the table, and I drop a cup of orange juice inside the Bruno's plates, and
So everything's going wrong, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, everything's going wrong.
Right.
I think I don't remember if I was nervous, but yeah, I probably was very nervous. You know,
Right.
it was crazy. And then we went to practice against SK. I remember it was train. I was like 0-14 or something.
Right.
And like, okay, I just want to get a kill, you know. I don't want to finish the first half. It was one of the first half I was playing with the guys. I was like 0-14. I was like, oh my god, everything's going wrong. I don't have money and stuff like this. I remember that I started to talk with a friend from Brazil, and I want to go back to Brazil. I don't want to
Right.
stay here and stuff like this. And at some point, even Neck passed behind me, and I was like out tabbing very fast, you know, like kind of like hiding something.
In case someone sees something on the screen, right?
Yeah, I was typing, and
Right.
I didn't want the guys to see that, and I was like out tabbing very fast. It was like very clear that I was saying.
You can tell you're hiding something. Yeah, sure.
I was hiding something.
Right.
And they're like, what are you talking? What are you talking? Stuff like this.
Right.
I went, no, nothing. And then I go back to the hotel, and I started to cry every night and stuff like this. It was very hard. I was 16, you know. But
must have been amazing to win the tournament. Then it sounds like, mate, if you didn't win this tournament, maybe you wouldn't have this whole career. Maybe that was the changing moment, right?
Yeah, it was very difficult for me. But as soon as the tournament starts, and I think my team carried me like the first maybe 3 games, 4 games, and then you start to have confidence, you know. And then I remember we beat Mouse Sports, which was like the star lineup from Germany. Like they had like the crazy mix between attacks and Mouse Sports.
Yes.
Yeah, like Tixo and all those guys. And as soon as I started winning some games, I was like, okay, maybe I can, you know, I can play at this level. And yeah, I had an amazing final then, which like kind of boosted my career. I think it was I think the most important thing was that my team carried me on the first like 3 games, you know, because if we lose, I think my career would be done back then. I saw a lot of players that had like the same opportunity as me, and like for example, I don't know if you remember Champ, like
very briefly,
yeah. I think he played just one tournament, and we lost to Swecon in Dreamhack, and then his career.
Oh,
is
right,
over,
I see. That's why it was over, right?
Yeah, and that could happen with me back then for sure.
By the way, being as I said, you got to join the squad where the rest of them were the ESWC champions. These are the most famous Brazilian players. So if I ask about some of these players, we can get into it. But I'll save the really big names. Like everyone knows Cogu. We can do that later. Let's do the ones that aren't as known. Like I feel like the person in this lineup. Remember, if you win ESWC, guys, you're a world champion in Counter-Strike. I feel like Bruno is the most forgotten player ever from this lineup. Like if I asked a random player now, who was he? I don't think they could remember. And I will say his game wasn't like anything super unusual. But I always thought like he seems like he seems like one of those like players that you want in a team. Like seems like maybe has a good attitude or something, a team player or something. Well, can you give me some thoughts on who this guy was? I noticed, by the way, in the history of Brazilian CS, he's just in these top teams whenever he wants to be. He's in for 1 million years, so seems like he must have been a very well liked teammate. Perhaps who was this guy?
Yeah, I think when he joined MIBR, he was kind of like the star player from G2X.
Oh, right.
Yeah, when he joined, but he was very selfless, you know. He didn't care about like being a star player or having to kill everybody. And you could ask him to change position every time, and you can ask him whatever you want, and he's gonna make without any question, you know, which was very good for the team back then, because at some point he was also a very good fragger. Like as I said, back in the days, you had to do everything, you know, but he was like more selfless. And at some point, I think, I was like kind of like at the spotlight, but most of the time it was Cogu, FNX, and maybe Nax sometimes, you know, but everyone had like a space to shine. But yeah, he was he was kind of like this. He was selfless, but he was very, very good player. Like I remember, people don't talk about him very much, but yeah, he saved us from so many tournaments. There was a lot of tournaments. I remember that he was putting a lot of numbers, making like winning clutches and stuff like this because he was very. I think he was also very shy. He didn't talk a lot. Well, he didn't do a lot of. There was no interviews back then.
Yeah,
but,
true. Yeah,
yeah, but he was very good as just like every player on the MIBR, but he was more shy.
I feel like in that sense, though, on the last point about like personality, I feel like if I contrast then Knack must be the opposite, right? If people don't know, it wasn't any surprise to me that this guy became a coach. Like, seems like he has an enormous personality, and it seems like everyone loves this guy too. He's around 1 million years in CS.
Yeah, Naki was insane back then. I remember a lot of times. I remember playing Nuke, and there was a lot of time I was playing ramp, and I would die, and then we had like this setup of the both A players dropping vents at the same time, and it was like FNX and Neck. I was like dying on ramp, and then the T's are going down to B side on Nuke. I like. They are counting 3, 2, 1, and there's like Nak and FNX appearing and killing everybody. It was like Nak was probably the best aim we had in Brazil because he was kind of like Nico nowadays. He was like doing only one taps and stuff like this. Like his aim was insane. He was very, very good. I think like FNX had like everybody had it like crazy aim, but Nak he was like more like he was crispy, he was very good. FNX he was like more explosive, like entry and stuff like this. But Nak like his AK was insane.
Yes. No, I often tell people about FNX. I always say it's not like he was the best player. Like, for example, Cogu was a better player probably. He's like a star player and stuff. No. But the thing with FNX, like you're saying, is it maybe in English you would say streaky. It's like a bit inconsistent. But when he's on his game, though, he was a massive like impact player. And crucially, in part, people will understand now why he has this personality. He also had the sort of like spirit to be a star player, if you know what I mean. But, there's some players where they could be the best player, but they don't want to be, or they want to be the best. This guy definitely wanted to be front and center and do whatever he wants in the game and make some crazy move, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people know FNX about from CS:GO.
Yes,
but he was like more like a Zipinix player.
Yes,
like
you're right.
Lurking, clutching a lot of rounds and stuff. But back to 1.6, he was like a monster. He was like going first, killing everybody. He was kind of the inside player.
He's really aggressive, like you're saying as well. He's like an entry player, right?
Yeah. He was always. In our team, we kind of had like FNX. He was always the first one,
right?
And then Nak was kind of like the trade of FNX, and then me, Bruno, we could do like more the lurky roles, more like separate stuff, and Cogu was like between everybody, But yeah, FNX was he was insanely aggressive, like just like Donk nowadays, maybe.
Sure. By the way, how does someone, like I said, I've heard in other teams in past and afterwards, there's times when Cogu was the IGL and he just got to do whatever he wanted. Like I said, put it this way, when I was friends with European players and I said to them, what do you do against MIBR? This might sound sarcastic, but they would say the mission is, like if you had a big blackboard, you'd just write point 1 is like just kill Cogu and you win the round. Like that's it. Like the aim of the game is don't let this guy farm you with the AWP. Like what's it like to be the in-game leader of a player like that? Like does Cogu just do what he wants? Can you control him? Can you bring him into the tactics? How do you work with a player like that, BIT? Because he was exceptionally good. Like he was really insanely good, right?
I think back to 1.6, we don't have a big structured game, just like we have today. Like today you have a lot of stuff. Like everybody knows what everybody's doing on the map. But back in the days, it was like mailing Cogu, he takes a lot of initiative. He was like, okay, I have this resp, I'm going to pick this, I'm going to pick this. It was mainly him. We didn't have a lot of set stuff.
Right. But if he calls something, you just let him do it. You kind of empower him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it was always like this. On City side, you do whatever you want. Maybe on T side, we have some strategies and stuff like this. But if he wants to pick something, he was always he always had the freedom to do whatever he wants.
Yes.
I think it's still like this nowadays. But I think nowadays people they have more set stuff, like it's more structured Counter-Strike,
Yes. Did you get the sense, by the way? Because I can tell you there were some foreign players. And if you think of how it works, like Brazilian Counter-Strike until you won ESWC wasn't actually considered that good. All the Europeans thought they were better. I can tell you, Cogu was one of the few players that even the other players actually were scared of. Like, put it this way, even people like big personalities like shgOpen told me, like, he actually might be better than me. Maybe he just is the best AWPer. Like, did you have a similar sense? Like, because I always think if you have a player like that, like obviously in the modern day people think of Ziwu and Simple and Donk and stuff. I feel like there's two parts. One, if you have that player on your team, you always feel like you can sort of get out of jail, as it were. Like, even if something bad happens, they can save the game for you. But also, that is a factor. Like, if you know the opponents are more scared of this guy, when they do the 3K and the name appears on the screen, you know that last guy's thinking, because it's Cogu or Forrest or Nico now, they think differently if that was Bruno or you. It just isn't. That affect's real, right?
Yeah, that's something that's a very big advantage if you're playing with a guy like this, because people, I think respecting the game makes a lot of difference, because they make the other team play maybe different than they are used to. And Cogu, Cogu was, he was not like a crazy player, but he was kind of like, okay, there's like 10 rounds and he's already like 15 kills,
He actually, you remember, have you ever seen, I don't know if you know this because I know it's in English, but on Reddit there was a really famous copy pasta for years. You remember it was about Olaf Meister and Guardian. It's this one where it went like, no one remembers Olaf Meister dropping 30 kills. You remember this copy pasta? It used to be on Reddit and they'd go, but everyone remembers a Guardian flick. The joke is, it's like you're saying, in a way, Cogu would just always get the kill every round. So it might look boring. You might think he hasn't even had any highlights, but you hit the scoreboard tab, like you say, and you'd be like, wait, he has like 20 kills. Like, it's kind of like that, right?
Yeah, we use it to talk about this about Code Zero in Brazil. It's kind of like this,
right?
Code Zero, okay, Code Zero, he don't do anything different. He's he's just an average player, and then you hit tab and he's like
exactly.
20, 25 and 2, and you're like, oh, how is this guy like this? But he kills like 3 on one round. He kills 3, and the other round he kills 4. And Cogu was kind of like this. Of course he had a lot of like highlights and big rounds, but just like the one on Inferno, the most famous one. But he had crazy rounds. But it was, as I said, he never missed any shot, and he was good with the AWP, with USP. He was good with rifle. He was killing every round around at least 1, 2, and it was crazy. But it's very good to have a guy like this on the team. You can count on him. But even though we had a lot of fights between Cogu and,
does he have a strong personality? Does he argue? Right.
Yeah, he's like, I remember I had a lot of fights about Cogu because you're doing everything he was saying and you just die, and
right.
Oh, why did you die? What the fuck? What are you doing? You can't die. Or like, Cogu, you don't know what happened on my screen. Can you calm down and stuff like this? We had at some point we even wanted to
kick him out the team or replace him. I'm gonna guess right.
To replace him. But at some point we don't understand that this was good for the team, because he was like, he was very good. He used it to. He was like perfectionist.
Yeah. So he's raising the standard, basically, right?
Right. He wanted everybody to play 1,000 kills on deathmatch, just like him. And he wanted everyone to watch demo. He wanted everyone to like throw the nades at the
by the way, one thing you're bringing up, I don't know if people know this, but I also heard stories back in the day that this guy also was like crazy practice. Like I heard when you guys went to those boot camps in Sweden, he would just tell the owner, like, just lock me in overnight, mate. I'll just keep playing like CSDM all night or bots or something. Like, is this true? Was he doing shit like that?
Yeah. I would say everyone from our team had the same.
Right.
We at some point we even stayed together as 5 players, and we had like a very good relation with the Inferno Line guys, like Budak, Sam, I think Wife was the other guy, and they trusted us so much that I think they closed it at 11 p.m. or something, and we wanted to play more, We wanted to keep playing, and we asked them to stay on the Inferno Line, and they had to lock us inside because there was like an alarm and stuff like this, which, okay, you can stay, but you have to stay the whole night. You have to sleep there, and you can just leave when we open again, at 10 a.m. or something. And yeah, and they could let us like pick whatever we want. Like if you want to drink something, you can pick.
Right.
You can eat whatever you want. You can just, you're home. We felt like home in Inferno Line, and yeah, everyone liked it to do it, but Cogu was like at another level.
Right.
He was like, yeah, if you want to do it once in a week, Cogu was like doing this like 3 times a week.
Right.
And, yeah, was a lot of time we were like sleeping, and then we wake up, we go like 10 a.m. to the Inferno Line, and then we met Cogu at the breakfast. It was like, okay, I slept to like 3 hours in the sofa at the Inferno Line. I come back, I will just shower, take a breakfast, and then I'm gonna practice more. He was just at another level of dedication. He was, everyone in our team had a lot of huge dedication, but yeah, Kogu was something else, I would say.
They say no man is an island. We all need people who've got our back, and supporting me and the content on my channel are the following people: Matt Pugnaccio Racula, The Concept, Animosity, Bane Diesel, Ben Glass, Jason, Jensen Gore, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it. Always a special thanks goes up to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask a question for my video AMA? Do you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions where I talk about whatever topics are on your mind? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming guests are, or maybe even to suggest a guest or a topic for my content? If any of those perks or others catch your fancy, well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where? In the Patreon link in the description box below.